and we're going to be reading from chapter 25. So I had a thought recently about sacrifice. You know, we all have desires, all of us. I mean, there's not a single human being that exists that does not have desire, every one of us. And we are plagued with desire. We want so much. We want a beautiful home. We want a nice car. We want a lovely phone. We want a wonderful partner. We want a beautiful body. We want everything the world has to offer. We want to go on vacations. We want everything the world has to offer. So think about it. We all have desire. Think about this very simple point. Why do we want what we want? It was very popular for a while, the law of attraction, and people wanted to have the best of everything. They wanted to have a big house. They wanted to have all their dreams come true. And there was this big line that was sold to everybody: to make your dreams come true. What are our dreams? Our dreams, perhaps, are our desires. And we all have desires, every single one of us. But why do we have desires? And where do they lead us? And are they really something worth pursuing and spending our whole life devoted and dedicated to? That's a big question. So to understand it, let's take a look at the different ways in which we go about for trying to fulfill our desires. The first of those is, well, we might go out and get a job. We're an employee, we work for a company, or we might become a professional, a therapist, a doctor, something like that, right? Or a business person. And according to the level of our accomplishment, we might be able to earn more or less than someone else. And then accordingly, we will have more. So we work so that we can acquire comfort, pleasure, freedom, independence. At least that's what we hope. But we actually don't get the comfort we seek or the pleasure we seek because we're spending most of our time working to get the things we want. And then by the time we get back, we're tired and exhausted. And then we're taking some kind of wine or some substance or food to help us relax. Maybe we're watching some entertainment to unwind and getting on TV. So our whole life really is spent working, unwinding, relaxing, and then finally sleeping. And maybe over the weekend we get some time if we don't have chores to do, shopping, groceries, so many other things that it takes to run a household. And ultimately, hopefully, we get some time that we enjoy. Because that's our hope. That's what we want. But are we getting what we want? Do we have the security we're looking for? Or are we getting nervous every time the markets go up and down? Do we have the security we want as we're getting older and we realize, well, our income's going to decrease massively? Do we have the kind of pleasure that we would like to have? And do we have the happiness that we aspire for? Now, some people have understood that to get more wealth, happiness, and so on, we need to do good karma. And so they engage in charity or worship of something higher. And the ultimate goal of all this karma, if you look at it from the point of view of the Vedic system, is to get a longer life, a more beautiful body, a greater wealth, or to perhaps minimize suffering and maximize pleasure. So the Vedas have this concept of the heavenly planets, places where you can go if you do the right kind of things, austerities, sacrifices, and so on and so forth, by which will elevate you, good karma in general. But there's a problem with that too, because even those are not places where you can escape birth, death, old age, and disease. Those follow us everywhere we go. The second solution that people find is called Gyana. Gyana is, well, at a very basic level, might be we go for school, we get educated, college, and all that kind of stuff. And then we try to better our life through that. But Gyana, even if we get good grades, isn't enough. The whole goal is really to do karma, or to be a Karmi. And even if you're a professor or a scholar, that doesn't really get you too far, not at least in terms of enjoying your senses. So the real Gyani is one who wants to know the nature of the absolute truth and attain liberation from the cycle of birth and death. That's the real Gyani. That's the ultimate knowledge. And it can be said that the Gyani, the one who is aware of themselves and of the nature of reality and wants to be free of the cycle of birth and death, is 1,000,000 times better than the Karmi, someone who's simply wrapped up in the acquiring of things and the enjoying of the world. But then, what's beyond that? And that third stage is called bhakti. Bhakti is higher than both the Gyani and the Karmi. Because the bhakta, the devotee, devotes their life to God through divine love and attains there from that the highest level of consciousness in which all desires are fulfilled. And one seeks nothing and needs nothing and feels completely at peace. Even the Gyani aspires for that and perhaps even attains some level of that. But there is much more in bhakti that one gains because we are not just pure consciousness. We are also one of the deepest aspects of consciousness is love. And the bhakta gets that. He gets the greatest love of all. The greatest love of all, by the way, is not loving oneself. The greatest love of all is divine love. And so for those who grew up on a steady diet of learning to love yourself, that is the greatest love of all, well, we were being kind of misled. But yes, that is the beginning of the journey. Learning to find out who you are and to love who you are is the beginning of the journey, not the end. So there's a lot to be learned here. And we're going to look at how it is that we can attain the highest quality of life possible. We're also going to look at how to become free from our desires. So for that, let's get into the Bhagavatam and explore what it has to say. The Bhagavatam, as you know, was written thousands and thousands of years ago. It was 5,000 years ago that it was written, and it was known for thousands of years before that, perhaps tens of thousands of years. We don't have actual numbers on that because this was an oral tradition that was being handed down. And it talks about various times and various evolved souls that lived on this planet and perhaps even on others. But mostly it is talking about here the Bhuloka, as it is called. So in chapter 24 earlier, we had talked about the Prachetas, the 10 sons of King Bharisat, also known as Prachina Barhi. Now, don't get too bothered by the names. We're going to be looking at the lessons to be learned from these kings and all these different great personalities. And by the way, these are known as itihasya, which means that which happened, that which occurred. So they're stated here as histories of what happened on this planet and of the kind of people that lived here and the lessons that we can learn from their life. They weren't all good, they weren't all saintly, and they weren't all wonderful, but for the most part, they were on the path to self-realization, and that's why their lessons, their stories, can be very meaningful to us. So when we talked about this king, we also talked about how his sons, the Prachetas, received blessings from Shiva. That was last time. Now their father, the king, we come to him. King Prachina Barhi. He was deeply immersed in karmic or fruitive activities, and to attain higher levels, like even more than you can through the normal means of hard work and, well, in the case of a king, taxation, he wanted to attain a higher level of pleasure that can be attained in the heavenly kingdoms or heavenly planets. Those are planets beyond this one here that we live in, out in the solar system where the quality of life is far superior to what we have here. The levels of happiness, the longevity of life, the amount of pleasure you're able to experience far exceeds what we have here. By the way, the people don't necessarily look like green little monsters, but they're incredibly beautiful, far more beautiful than people here. That's hard to imagine by the way Hollywood has depicted all of that. Anyway, the great sage Narad, being compassionate on the king, decided to instruct him about spiritual life. Now, that's kind of what spiritually advanced people do. They have nothing better to do, frankly, except to go around and try to elevate other human beings who might be ready. Well, in this case, it didn't look like the king is ready. So Narad had to tread very carefully. And as he came to instruct the king, because this king was very attached to worldly things, as many of us are, and he was very attached to improving his material condition, to having more, doing more, enjoying more. He was greedy, he was going gung-ho to fulfill his dreams and his desires. So Narad, the great saint, said to the king, Prachina Barhi, he said, "My dear king, what do you desire to achieve by performing these karmic activities? The chief aim of life is to get rid of all miseries and enjoy happiness. But these two things cannot be realized by karmic activity." Now, actually, if this was said to a receptive person, they'd get it like this, right? That the chief aim of life is to get rid of all miseries and enjoy happiness. Of course, everyone wants that, right? The spiritual person wants that. The materialistic person wants that. Nobody wants miseries and everybody wants to be happy. Done deal. Everybody's on board with that. But what he's saying that goes beyond all of our thinking is that these two things cannot be realized by karmic activity. In other words, by doing the things that we do. It cannot be. True happiness cannot be found through our karmic activities, because by our actions we will have some degree of happiness, maybe a few moments of it, but most of the time we will struggle. Most of the time we will be stressed. Most of the time we will be anxious and fearful and worried. And that's not happiness, right? Most of the times the weather will be unpredictable, the traffic will be unpredictable, people will be unpredictable, and they will cause us miseries. Our body will cause us sickness, it will cause disease, it will go through all kinds of ups and downs. So where is the freedom from miseries? And where is the happiness? So the king, of course, agreed, with the general statement of Narad. Now, it's one thing to agree intellectually, but it's another thing to really get it. So Narad had to kind of enlighten him. He said, those who are interested only in so-called dutiful life, that is, fulfilling your duties, taking care of your family, etc., namely remaining as a householder entangled with family and children and searching after wealth, such people think that such things are life's ultimate goal. Such people simply wander in different types of bodies throughout the material existence without finding out the ultimate goal of life. Right? So he's really now starting to let the king know that this stuff that you're doing isn't going to work. In Vedic times, there was a process of performing animal sacrifices for elevation to the heavenly planets. The animal, on the other hand, was supposed to be elevated to human birth. Of course, this practice was kind of an allowance made for people who were going to kill animals anyway. So Narad began by showing the king something. He says, "My dear king, please see in the sky those animals which you have sacrificed without compassion and without mercy in the sacrificial arena. All these animals are waiting your death so that they can avenge the injuries you inflicted upon them. After you die, they will angrily pierce your body with iron horns." So you've heard of the concept of karma. Karma, if you want to put it in very modern day language, is that which goes around, comes around. That which you do to another shall be done unto you. When you eat an animal, you have essentially paid for that animal to be slaughtered. If you didn't pay for it, they wouldn't slaughter it. They only do it because you are willing to pay. And for those who then fund that animal killing industry, there will be karma. They will experience the very pain that was caused to that animal, the very suffering that was caused to that animal, the very the great injustice that was done to that animal. The fact of the matter is you cannot escape karma. You may think it's not going to come to you, but karma comes to everyone. And then when we look at someone who is experiencing their karma, we say, oh, poor thing. Oh my gosh, why is this person going through so much suffering? Well, we don't know what they did before. We don't know that the things they did before led to this moment where now that karma has caught up with them. Srila Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavatam, he says, animal sacrifice is risky because as soon as there is a small discrepancy in the execution of such a sacrifice, the slaughtered animal may not be promoted to a human form of life. Consequently, the person performing the sacrifice will be responsible for the death of the animal just as much as a murderer is responsible for killing another person. When animals are killed in a slaughterhouse, 6 people connected with the killing are responsible for the murder. The person who gives permission for the killing, the person who kills, the person who helps, the person who purchases the meat, the person who cooks the flesh, and the person who eats it, all become entangled in the killing. I've seen it personally. It makes such a huge difference. I know that I'm one of the only people in my family that are vegetarian and have been for over 45 years now. But I've seen the difference it makes in one's consciousness, in one's ability to be compassionate, in one's ability to be able to empathize, but more than anything, to have a quiet mind, a peaceful mind. It makes a world of difference. How can you possibly be eating animals and thinking of yourself as a kind, compassionate, or loving human being? How can you be causing grief to others and yourself trying to be peaceful? It isn't going to happen. The aggression, the anger, the pain that that animal felt is in its body. And that is now being eaten by you. And that food now will bring that energy into you. There is no escaping it. None at all. And so we see a world that is full of angry people, people who are unable to quiet their mind, people who are unable to be kind and compassionate and loving. I'm not saying being vegetarian is the only thing, but it is a solid foundation on which to begin one's spiritual path. I'm going to go so far as to say that if you truly want to be spiritual, it is essential to stop killing animals or participating in the killing of animals or eating them in any way, shape, or form. All right, let's get back to the Bhagavatam. It is said that if good instruction is given to a foolish person, he becomes angry. So maybe if I said those things, you may also feel angry. I don't know. But it is said that if good instruction is given to a foolish person, he becomes angry and turns against the instructions given instead of taking advantage of them. Because Narad Muni knew this very well, he indirectly instructed the king by narrating his life story as an allegory. So he's going to take the king's life story, turn it into an allegory, and present it back to the king. Sort of an indirect way of trying to make the king aware of where he's at. It's kind of like giving you a distance to your own situation. Because if you tell a person directly, they sometimes get all defensive, right? So once they see things from a distance, they see it from a third party, then it's easier. So Narad, the great saint Narad, says to the king, he says, "My dear king, once in the past there lived a king named Puranjana." In the allegory, that means one who possesses a body. Okay? Puranyajan, one who enjoys in a body. So this king was celebrated for his great activities. He had a friend named Avigyata, the unknown one, or Paramatma. No one could understand the activities of this friend, Avigyata. So now here is this person, right, who lives in a body. So the symbolism here is the soul that lives in this body and is here, enjoys this body. Along with the soul is the Paramatma, the great soul, or the presence of God within us. So there is the soul and the super soul, or the Paramatma, the great soul, sitting within each of us. The great soul or Paramatma is the witness. The soul is the one that is working through its desires. The Paramatma, the great soul, we do not know. We do not understand its activities, do not understand what it's doing. Why is it here? We don't know. We are avigya, unable to understand. Srila Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, text number 15, Sarvasya chaham hridhi sanivishta mata smritir jnanam apohanam cha. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. So some people may say, well, no, it's not Krishna who's seated there. There is just the Paramatma is seated. That's different than Krishna. No. Sarvasya cha aham. Sarvasya means in everyone. Aham means I am. Hridhi means heart. I am in everyone's heart. Mata smritir. From me comes smriti. Smriti means remembrance. Jnanam, knowledge. Apohanam, or forgetfulness. From me comes, you want to forget me? By all means, I'll give you the means by which to forget me. You want to remember me? You want to find me? I'll give you the means by which to do that. The way to find me. So Krishna as Paramatma is seated in everyone's heart and allows us to act in whatever way we desire. We may not know this, but we cannot fulfill any desire without his sanction. Now, there's a saying that nothing happens without the will of God. Does it mean, therefore, that God does everything? No, not really. But he gives us the ability to fulfill our desire. What do you mean by that? He gives us the ability. Well, the first thing that you have as your ability is that your heart is functioning, that you're able to stand on 2 feet. These are miraculous events. The body is working. That gives you the ability. Your brain is firing and functioning. You did not create that brain. You did not create that heart. You did not create this body. All of that was provided for you so that you could go out and fulfill your desires. Well then, why did he give us all this to fulfill our desires, but yet desire is not a good thing? Like, why this contradiction? Wonderful question. To answer that, we need to look at choice. We need to understand that to love God is not something that is going to be forced on us. We cannot force someone to love us, right? If you fall in love with someone, can you force that person to love you back? No. They must choose you, just as you must choose them, right? So in the same way it is with God. God doesn't force us to love him. That would be absolutely wrong. Loving God, accepting God, worshiping God is a choice. And we have been given free will to make that choice. So if we don't want to, or we want to, that choice is ours. If we would rather desire everything of the world, everything possible, then we are given the option to do that. Go right ahead. But the day we desire God, above all else, he will show us the way. He's seated in our heart. He will show us the way. You will find your way to something like this or something else. Whatever is closest and truest to you, you will find that. And you will know it is right because you will feel within yourself, you will have found your level. There are many kinds of spirituality. No one path is the ultimate or ideal path for everyone. We are all at different levels of spiritual growth. Growth that we have done in various lifetimes and which is never lost. So when we come in this lifetime and we fulfilled our desires, we've seen this doesn't work, or maybe even if without trying we observed other people, we saw that they weren't happy. Like, people want to be a millionaire. But very rarely does anybody ask, are millionaires happy? Are they satisfied? Have they attained the ultimate bliss of life? And you'll find they haven't. They're as miserable as everybody else. right? So if that's the case, then what's the answer? Where do I go? Who do I turn to? He's seated within your heart, and no matter how confused you are and how lost you are, he will guide you in your path and bring you. Now it's up to you to make that choice, to take that action, to do what needs to be done. So it's wonderful. He's always there, waiting for us, wanting us to come back to him, but never pushing it. That's freedom. So back to the story of our king. This king was searching for a suitable place to live. He had unlimited desires for sense enjoyment. Consequently, he traveled all over the world to find a place where all his desires could be fulfilled. Unfortunately, he found a feeling of insufficiency everywhere. No place was exactly to his liking. He became morose and disappointed. I've been through the same thing. I found that when I would come, let's say, to America, I would think, oh, this is such an incredible place. So wonderful. Then I'd get disappointed here. And because gradually, the illusion wears off and now you can see the reality. And then you land up in another place, right? You'll land up I would go back to India and say, I'm so glad to be back. It's so wonderful here. And then the illusion would wear off. And then gradually all the reality would show up. Then eventually I realized there's no place in this world that's perfect. Every place has its ups and downs, its positive and its negative. There's no person in this world that is perfect. Every person has their positive and negative qualities. Everything, everywhere. So this king is looking everywhere to find the perfect place and feeling disappointed. Then on the southern side of the Himalayas in Bharatvarsh, now known as India, he came across a city with 9 gates. The city was surrounded by walls and parks, and within it were towers, canals, windows, and outlets. Okay, just to give you a hint now, the city that he's talking about is the body. 9 gates are the 9 openings in the body: 2 eyes, 2 ears, nostrils, mouth, anus, and so on. 9 openings within the body. So this is what is called the city of 9 gates. The houses there were decorated with domes made of gold, silver, and iron. Now again, this is a metaphor for the fact that we have within us different modes of nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And they interplay between each other, affecting our consciousness and influencing our life. And when we become aware of these, what is goodness, what is passion, what is ignorance, and we've talked about it a lot in the Bhagavad Gita. So I'll tell you very briefly again. Goodness is where we move towards that which is spiritual, where we move towards that which brings peace and harmony within ourselves. Passion is where we work hard to attain things, to achieve things. And ignorance is where we are lazy and depressed and don't feel like doing anything. We're unmotivated. So we're in the mode of ignorance. So he says the houses there were decorated with domes made of gold, silver, and iron, indicating these 3 different states of consciousness. The floors of the houses in the city were made of sapphire and crystal, diamonds, pearls, emeralds, and rubies. There were many assembly houses, street crossings. So again, here now the analogies of the heart and all the different crossings and the different veins and arteries that are going on. So streets, restaurants, gambling houses, markets, resting places, flags, festoons, and beautiful parks. So this is the analogy being set up of the human being within this body. On the outskirts of that city were many beautiful trees and creepers encircling a nice lake. So trees and creepers like the hairs on her body. Also surrounding that lake were many groups of birds and bees that were always chanting and humming. The branches of the trees standing on the bank of the lake received particles of water carried by the spring air from the falls coming down from the icy mountain. In such an atmosphere, even the animals of the forest became non-violent and non-envious, like great sages. Consequently, the animals did not attack anyone. Over and above everything was the cooing of the cuckoos. Any passenger passing along that path was invited by the atmosphere to take rest in that nice garden. Now see, this is the nature of consciousness. Pure consciousness is exactly like that. It is a resting place for yourself and for everyone who comes across it. We have the body, we have consciousness, but there's more, right? There's much more. And now we need to reckon with that. So, The analogy goes further. The king now came in contact with a very beautiful woman. This woman, by the way, just to give you the cheat sheet, represents intelligence. Okay, so you have the mind, but you also have intelligence. She was walking aimlessly. She had 10 servants. This again now refers to the 5 knowledge acquiring senses and the 5 working senses. I won't go into it because it's not relevant for this discussion, but just keep in mind our different senses, right? So she had 10 servants with her, and each servant had hundreds of wives. And that, if you want to know the insight, is innumerable desires. Each of the senses has innumerable desires that it wants to fulfill. Different things that it wants to do, different places, different smells and sights and sounds. She was protected on all sides by a 5-hooded snake. Okay. It's important to understand this, because if you just read it by itself, you won't know what it's talking about. The 5-hooded snake that is being talked about here is the vital force. Pratihara, which is the bodyguard within us. It is compared to a serpent which can breathe or live on air. And it controls the 5 kinds of air within the body. Prana, Apan, Vyan, Samana, and Udan. Again, too much detail to get into right now. We want to get the big picture of what this analogy is all about. So, there's a serpent within all of us, 5-hooded serpent. Again, it's a symbol. Please don't take it literally. That is the vital force, Pratihara. And it can live on just air. And it controls the 5 kinds of functions within the body, the life energy within the body. So remember the woman, the analogy is of intelligence, right? Now she was very beautiful and young. And here again is mentioned, intelligence must always be fresh or young, right? Because if your intelligence is old, as in you think you know, well, then you're kind of stale in your intelligence. You're dying in your intellect. You're not really growing. To be growing, you need to be young, fresh, or curious, might be another way of saying it. Her nose, teeth, forehead, waist, breasts, and hips were all very beautiful. Her ears were bedecked with dazzling earrings. She was dressed in yellow sari with a golden belt. While she walked, her ankle bells rang. She smiled shyly and appeared exactly like the denizen of the heavens and seemed anxious to find a husband. Now, we're coming to something else. You see, we're all fascinated with our mind and our intellect. In fact, right now with the advent of artificial intelligence, our fascination is being brought up to the max. We've been admiring knowledge. We call this the knowledge technology, right? Google and all of that. And now it's moving up with all this artificial intelligence. Because we have put so much of importance on intelligence, but that intelligence can be replicated even by a machine. Consciousness, on the other hand, cannot. Right? So intelligence is very alluring, like this beautiful woman, very attractive, very seductive. And we're all chasing it. When we look at someone who's intelligent, we're like, oh my God, we're so enamored by this person. They know so much. But really all they have is just a sharp mind or a memory or something like that. So this woman was looking for a husband. What is the husband of intelligence? Consciousness. The real husband. So now the king was immediately pierced by the arrows of lusty desire and could not refrain from addressing her. He asked her if she was a goddess like Parvati or Lakshmi or Saraswati. But then on noticing that her feet touched the ground, he said, well, it can't be that. He asked perhaps if she would associate with him. Maybe she is human and maybe she would associate with him, and together they could increase the beauty of this city. So he created like a life purpose for them in that. He said, you should understand that I'm a great hero and a very powerful king. Your smile, which is full of shyness, but at the same time lusty, is agitating the most powerful Cupid within me. Therefore, O most beautiful, I ask you to be merciful upon me. I'm not sure if you're a woman listening, how you'd feel if someone spoke to you like that. You might find yourself a little taken aback. The girl was also attracted to the king and accepted his request by smiling. She was being shy, she was being coy, but she smiled and approved. She said, I do not know who has begotten me. So this is a very important statement. I don't know who has begotten me. Who has begotten your intelligence? Think about that. Is it the media? Is it society? Is it your religion? Who or what has begotten your intelligence? Who is controlling what you think? Who is determining what you believe? Are you truly free? Do you really know? Is what you know really true? It's important to question these things. So she says, I do not know who has begotten me. Remember, she's the symbol for intelligence. I cannot speak to you perfectly about this, nor do I know the names or the origin of the associates with me. So the intelligence is not necessarily aware of all these forces that are influencing the intelligence, our senses. Our senses drive us. We might, through our intelligence, we might know that a certain food, let's say sugar, is not good for us, or some other thing, meat or whatever else. We might know it through our intellect, but our senses drive us to have that very thing, or some addiction, or some alcohol or drug, or whatever else it might be. So I do not know what is driving me. I do not know the names and origin of the associates that are with me, the intelligence says. Now, these are the senses. O great hero, we only know that we are existing in this place. We do not know what will come after. Indeed, we are so foolish that we do not care to understand who has created this beautiful place for our residence. Think about it. We are indeed like this. We do not question, where did this body come from? Where did this intellect come from? Why am I here in this? Why am I a man or why am I a woman? Why am I in this situation? Why do I have this and why do they not have this, or they have more? What is going on? What is the purpose of life? We do not question. And when we do, it's really hard to hear the answers, because those answers will destroy the world that you were living in. They will bring it down to nothingness. And at that point, it's very scary for the mind, for the ego, to handle that. But it is exactly what is needed. Until you dismantle the old, it's very difficult to create the new. You can do some amount of repair and you can do some amount of fixing. But the real change happens with completely dismantling it and recognizing the real purpose why we're here. So she continues, we do not know what will come after. Indeed, we are so foolish that we do not care to understand who has created this beautiful place for our residence. All these men and women with me are known as my friends, and the snake, who always remains awake, protects this city even during my sleeping hours. So much I know. I do not know anything beyond this. So this snake we talked about earlier is the life force. And that life force is constantly taking care of everything. It's making sure that we breathe. It's making sure that our heart is pumping. It is making sure that the blood is circulating, that the food is digesting, that everything is working. The heart in and of itself doesn't do that. They can replace a heart. They can replace a liver. They can replace the blood in your body. But the life force, once it leaves, they cannot replace that. There is no physical way to touch it or hold it. So that's what's being referred to as the five-headed serpent in here, in this metaphor. She continues, you have a great desire to satisfy your senses, and all my friends and I shall try our best in all respects to fulfill your desires. So this is the nature of how intellect is there. It's there to serve us. And the intellect wants, along with all the senses, to please you and fulfill all your desires. Of course, the fact of the matter is we must find out, are we really getting pleased and are we really being satisfied? It's another question. So then she says, I have just arranged this city of 9 gates for you so that you can have all kinds of sense gratification. You may live here for 100 years and everything you for your sense gratification will be supplied. How can I expect to unite with others who are neither conversant about sex nor capable of knowing how to enjoy life while living or after death? Such foolish persons are like animals because they do not know the process of sense enjoyment in this life and after death. Oh, my dear hero, Who in this world will not accept a husband like you? You are so famous, so magnanimous, so beautiful, and so easily gotten. The two then entered the city and supported one another through mutual understanding and enjoyed life for 100 years. So this is really not the story of some king. This is our story. And we are the ones who are enamored by this world, by this mind, by this intellect, by this body. The story continues. When the queen drank liquor, King Puranjana also engaged in drinking. When the queen dined, he would dine with her. When the queen sang, he also sang. Similarly, when the queen cried, he also cried. When the queen laughed, he also laughed. When the queen talked loosely, he also talked loosely. When the queen walked, the king walked behind her. Keep in mind, he's a king, and he's not being a king. We are meant to be the ruler of this mind-body organism, including our intellect. We are meant to provide a higher wisdom and a guidance to this body-mind organism that we live in, and yet we follow it rather than guiding it. We follow our mind wherever it takes us. We do whatever our intellect says. We follow our senses wherever they want to go. We're like the dog leading the master, the subject leading the king. Right? It's ridiculous. And then we wonder why we have mental disease. Of course we'll have mental disease. No one ever taught us to take charge of this body-mind organism. No one taught us that you're meant to be the king or the ruler, the queen of this mind-body organism. You are meant to be in charge of this. It is not meant to be in charge of you. You're not supposed to do whatever it tells you. But this is how the analogy goes on. When the queen sat, he would sit. When the queen heard something, he would follow her to hear the same thing. When the queen saw something, the king would also look at it. When the queen smelled something, the king would follow her to smell the same thing. When the queen touched something, the king would also touch it. And when the queen was lamenting, the poor king also had to follow her in lamentation. In the same way, when the queen felt enjoyment, he also enjoyed. And when the queen was satisfied, the king also felt satisfaction. In this way, King Puranjanan was captivated by his nice wife and was thus cheated. Indeed, he became cheated in his whole existence in the material world. Even against that poor, foolish king's desire, he remained under the control of his wife, just like a pet animal that dances according to the order of its master. It's hard to hear that, but that's kind of what we are. We're slaves to our own mind, our desires, our senses. It was almost impossible for King Puranjanan to give up the company of his queen, even for a moment. Nonetheless, one day, being very much inspired by the desire to hunt, he took up his bow and arrow and with great pride went to the forest, not caring for his wife. So that might tell us something about how we sometimes do that which is not even what our intellect tells us. We know certain things are not good for us and we still do them anyway. So that's what's happening here. The king took up his great bow and equipped with golden armor and a quiver of unlimited arrows and accompanied by 11 commanders, he sat on his chariot driven by 5 swift horses and went to the forest named Panchapratha. Influenced by demonic propensities, his heart became very hard and merciless, and with sharp arrows he killed many innocent animals in the forest, taking no consideration for the pain he was causing them. Often we do things like that, or at times at least, where we say mean and hurtful things to other people, where we are rude and nasty, where we yell and scream, where we become disrespectful of others, because at some point we become overtaken by dark energies, perhaps not the best side of ourselves, perhaps the worst of ourselves, and later on we feel ashamed for that, maybe, and sometimes we feel very righteous about it. So this king went out and he did all of this stuff, killed all these animals. It said if a king is too attracted to eating flesh, he may, according to the Vedas, go to the forest and kill some animals that are recommended for killing for sacrificial offering. So it is to be, there's a whole procedure. It's not like a slaughterhouse. You may kill for sacrificial offering. One is not allowed to kill animals unnecessarily or without restriction. The Vedas regulate animal killing to stop the extravagance of foolish men influenced by the modes of passion and ignorance. So those who are in the lower states of consciousness, they seek to eat other creatures. And it's very hard to tell them otherwise, because they're not willing to understand, they're not willing to hear, they don't care what you say. So the Vedas try to regulate that kind of activity by saying, okay, fine, if you're going to do it, only one creature. And that too, you must offer it as an act of sacrifice. And so they have to do all kinds of ceremonies and all kinds of rituals to be able to elevate that creature that they have killed, and hopefully in the way also gain some good karma for themselves. So this is inviting them into that path. Any person who works according to the direction of the Vedas does not become involved in karmic activities. One who acts whimsically falls down due to false prestige. Thus he becomes involved in the laws of nature, which are composed of these qualities: goodness, passion, and ignorance. In this way, a living entity becomes devoid of his intelligence and becomes perpetually lost in the cycle of birth and death. Thus he goes up and down from a microbe in stool to a high position in the heavenly planets. So this is what the journey is about. There are 8,400,000 species of life according to the Vedas, all the way down from the microbe to the beings, the alien beings who live on the heavenly planets. And for those of you that are new, we'll bring you up to speed on that. Basically, they talk about planets beyond this planet where life is more beautiful, where people live longer, have more amazing bodies. But even they come back to this world, because birth, death, old age, and disease are everywhere in this material world, whether you're on the heavenly planets or in some hellish place. That could be in some beautiful place on this world or this planet, or in some difficult place like a desert place or something like that, right? In all of them, we all suffer. But Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that one who comes to my abode never returns to this temporary and miserable world. Right? So temporary and miserable, that's what we need to understand about this world. Whether you're in some heavenly planet or you're on the earth, which is the middle realm, or you're in the lower planetary systems. Either way, whether the suffering is the greatest or the suffering is the least, all of them are places of suffering, wherein repeated birth and death take place. All right, so the king now finished his hunting, and many animals in the forest were killed with great pain, being pierced by sharp arrowheads. Upon seeing these devastating, ghastly activities performed by the king, all the people who were merciful by nature became very unhappy. Such merciful persons could not tolerate seeing all this killing. The king killed many animals, including rabbits, boars, buffalo, bison, black deer, porcupines, and other game animals. After killing and killing, the king became very tired and returned to his palace. He had dinner and bathed. He then smeared scented sandalwood pulp all over his body, put on flower garlands, and decorated his body with suitable ornaments. In this way, he became completely refreshed. After this, he began to search out his queen and couldn't find her. He asked her maids, "That beautiful woman who always saves me when I am drowning in the ocean of danger by giving me good intelligence at every step, she always saves me. Where is she?" They told him, "She is lying on the ground without bedding. We cannot understand why she is acting in this way." So the king, seeing his queen lying on the ground, became immediately bewildered. See, basically, she was very upset. When we abandon our intelligence is very disturbed, very upset, very wounded by the fact that we have acted in a way that is not in our best interest. We feel ashamed. We feel regret, right? And that's what's being shown here. So now the king goes up to his wife and he says, "My dear wife, your teeth are very beautiful and your attractive features make you appear very thoughtful. Kindly give up your anger. Be merciful upon me. And please smile upon me with loving attachment. When I see a smile on your beautiful face, and when I see your hair, which is as beautiful as the color blue, and when I see your raised nose and hear your sweet talk, you will become more beautiful to me and thus attract me and oblige me. You are my most respected wife. If someone has offended you, I am prepared to give such a person punishment, as long as he does not belong to the Brahmins or is a servant of God. I excuse no one within or beyond these three worlds. No one can freely move after offending you, for I am prepared to punish him. So the king, you can see, was very expert in flattery, very expert in trying to comfort his wife. He then apologized. He says, due to my sinful desires, I went to the forest to hunt without asking you. Therefore, I must admit that I have offended you. Nonetheless, thinking of me as your most intimate subordinate, you should still be very much pleased with me. Factually, I am very much bereaved. But being pierced by the arrow of Cupid, I am feeling lusty. Where is that beautiful woman who would give up her lusty husband and refuse to unite with him? He's absolutely charming her with his words. After enticing her husband in different ways, so now the queen turned around and she also began to entice her husband in different ways, and after bringing him under her control, the queen gave him all satisfaction and enjoyed sex with him. They then enjoyed joking words. The king again became very much captivated by his beautiful wife and deviated from his good sense. He forgot that the passing of days and nights meant that his span of life was being reduced without profit. Okay, this is something to decode here. So now it would seem like they're peaceful and harmonious all over again. They're having a good time again. And yet it says here that his days and nights were passing and that the span of his life was being reduced without profit. This is something to contemplate deeply. We all live thinking that enjoying our senses, enjoying our home, our family is the ultimate goal of life. But what if it's not? What if there's more to life? And what if, in the pursuit of acquiring everything that we desire, in the pursuit of chasing our dreams, in the pursuit of trying to be something and have something and do something, we are wasting our life? Because this human form of life is very precious. Like I said to you earlier, there are 8,400,000 species, and very few of those are human. And the human form of life is acquired after many, many, many births in all these different species. And finally, when we get that human form of life, if we don't use it for self-realization, you know how the saying goes, if you don't use it, you lose it. And so it is. And then we go back into that cycle of all the other species because we're not using the human form of life for what it was meant for. But if we do use it, then whatever spiritual progress we make is never lost. That's another important part to understand as well. So this is what they mean, that he was wasting his life away. And it's a question I'd like you to ponder as well. Are you using your life to advance spiritually? What does spiritual advancement mean? What will free you from the cycle of birth and death? What will bring you the ultimate happiness and fulfillment that you desire? Have you achieved it yet? Has anyone around you achieved it? If not, then listen to the sages talk about it in the Vedas and how they attained it and what it took to get there. Although advanced in consciousness, the king remained always lying down with his head on the pillow of his wife's arms. In this way, he considered her to be his ultimate life and soul. This sounds so romantic, right? And yet, seen from a vision of self-realization, seen from the vision of enlightenment, it's not. Becoming thus overwhelmed by the mode of ignorance, he could not understand the meaning of self-realization. They had many children. They had many children, and when they came of age, they arranged their marriage and had hundreds of grandchildren who were virtually plunderers of the king's riches, including his home, treasury, servants, secretaries, and all other paraphernalia. The bigger the family got, the more their demands grew, and the more they wanted, and the more he had to give. And so his own treasury became so much poorer. King Puranyagya, his attachment for these things is very deep-rooted. Puranyajan. Being implicated in so many desires, the king worshipped demigods, forefathers, and social leaders with various sacrifices, which were all very ghastly because they were inspired by the desire to kill animals. Now it starts to talk about the next step. There was a Gandharva king. So Gandharvas are again in this heavenly planet. But again, this is an analogy. His name was Chandavega. And the analogy is for time. Okay, regarding time. There is a Gandharva king named Chandavega. Under him there are 360 very powerful Gandharva soldiers. 360 here represents 360 days in a year. All of them repetitively plundered all the paraphernalia for sense enjoyment. So time plunders our ability to enjoy. Time plunders our youth. Time plunders our senses. It weakens our ability to enjoy. So when this King Chandavega, who was the representative of time, and his followers began to plunder the city of Puranjana, a snake with 5 hoods began to defend the city. So now as time comes to plunder this city, this body, mind, organism that we live in, our life force energy tries to defend us, tries to defend against time. The 5-hooded serpent, the superintendent and protector of the city of King Puranjana, fought with the Gandharvas for 100 years. He fought alone, but with all of them, although they numbered 720. So how did the number go from 360 to 720? That's because there are day and night. So day 360 in a year and night 360 in a year, so 720, right? So now the warriors attacking us are 720 in a year, and that now multiplied by the number of years you've lived. Because he had to fight alone with so many soldiers, all of whom were great warriors, the serpent with 5 hoods became very weak. So our life energy becomes weakened over time. Seeing that his most intimate friend was weakening, King Puranjana and his friends and citizens living within the city all became very anxious. Which is again what happens to all of us. We get very anxious as we see with the passing of time, our body starting to weaken, get more prone to be ill, more prone to all kinds of problems. Being completely under the control of the senses, he could not understand that his life was passing away and that he was reaching the point of death. At this time, the daughter of formidable time was seeking her husband throughout the 3 worlds. Although no one agreed to accept her, she came. The daughter of time, Jara. So, Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi. There are 4 things that are mentioned in the Vedas. Janma is birth, Mrityu, death, Jara, old age, and Vyadhi. No, actually, Jara is actually more like death and disease, yeah. So the daughter of time, Jara, was very unfortunate. Consequently, she is known as Durbhaga, ill-fated. However, she was once pleased with the great king, and because the king accepted her, she granted him a great benediction. But I think what we'll do is we'll continue that part of the story next time. I was thinking maybe we'll stop here for now. We're going to see how time came to ravage the king, how time comes to all of us to teach us that this is not all there is, that we need to wake up, that we need to pay attention, that life is very precious and we're wasting it on struggling to fulfill our desires, to meet our needs. But this body for which who we work, this mind for who we try to fulfill its desires, will perish. And everything we've acquired will be left behind. And so it's very important that we stop and ask the questions and we start to think about these things and start to devote our life to a higher purpose. All right, for that, we'll stop now. I want to look at all the questions that you guys have been writing. Hey, Melissa, if you're here, welcome. That's so nice to have you. Celi's written a wonderful comment here. A fascinating analogy to the king, us, of the body, its senses and consciousness that influence intelligence. As we proceed, process desires and karma, we eventually reach the sweet abode within our heart. Yes, that is so true, Celi, that, as we peel away the layers of karma, as we peel away the layers of attachment to our mind, to our intellect, to our body, right? As we separate ourselves from all of that, we then can enter into the true heart, the heart within the heart. So there's the physical heart, and then there's the heart within the heart, and that is the soul. So to come to that, we have to literally go beyond all of the senses, all of our desires, all of our needs. You say, but that's impossible. The point is not that we won't have desires. Of course, we're going to have desires, but we need to have a focus to our desires. See, all of us eat, right? We like good food. Okay. It's not that you have to stop wanting good food. You can channel your desires towards God. So, for example, you want to eat a nice meal. Eat a vegetarian meal, I would recommend, or a vegan meal, whichever you prefer, and make it as an offering to God. Offer it to Him. Say, please, you accept this. Before you eat it, offer it. And now it becomes something that is fulfilling both your spiritual nature and your human nature. But first, let it be fulfilling your spiritual nature. When you work, do that work as an offering to the divine. Let go the attachment to the fruits of that work, and let it be a sacred work. When you take care of your home or this body, consider it to be a temple of God, and take care of it from that perspective. So you're doing the same things, but now the focus is different. You're recognizing where all this came from. You're giving thanks. You're acknowledging. You're serving. You're devoting. And you are surrendering everything you have, including your desires, to God. So it's not about renunciation, because how can you renounce something that was never yours? None of this world was ever yours. This body was never yours. This mind was never yours. It was all given to you. And since that is the case, you need to know who gave it to you, and then with deepest gratitude and working in complete conjunction with that which gave it to you, or God, as we say, we're able to fulfill the purpose of human life and become connected once again, reunited once again with God. That is yoga. Yoga means to become reconnected with the divine, to go into alignment with the divine, or with God, or Krishna as we call him. Let's see what Celi's got here. Where self-realization and knowledge beyond becomes who we really are. Is there a time limit to reach this awareness before digressing? Celi, this is the amazing thing about the Vedic culture and the understanding they have. Time is infinite. Once you understand this basic principle that time is timeless, you have infinite time on your side to figure it out, to come to this place of understanding. Now, it doesn't mean that that's going to be a pleasant time. It doesn't mean that because you have infinite time, that time is going to be without suffering. No. The longer you take, the more you will go through the suffering of this world. That's going to come with it. So if you shorten the process by getting on top of it, by really understanding it, by breaking free from the control of your mind, your body, your senses, your desires, then yes, you will very quickly accelerate the path back to God. That path is not difficult. It may seem difficult, but the real progress is not made by your effort. The real progress, the real advancement is made by grace. And that grace comes through surrender. The more you let go trying to control the world, the more you let go trying to determine how people should be, how the world should be, how you should be, the more you get rid of all this nonsense, the more you realize you're not in control of anything, the more you'll be able to surrender. The more you'll be able to be in your heart, and you'll be able to offer everything you do and everything that you are to God. And with that, grace will be showered upon you because you have emptied yourself of the ego. And as you empty yourself of the ego of who you think you are and what you want and how things should be, as you empty out all of that, you will be filled with that nectarian bliss of divine presence. The Paramatma will awaken within you. Krishna will be with you. And you will feel his presence everywhere, in everyone. There's no doubt about this. This is exactly how it works. And it will work for you as well. Thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Hare Krishna.